I'm on a gardening road trip in Kalinga, just north of Mount Gambier in the southeast of South Australia. Kalinga is a small place of about 300 people. Its name comes from the local Indigenous word meaning big trees in water. There are certainly lots of those, but the town is also in the middle of some very rich agricultural land. And that's why I'm here, because the area's fertility produces some pretty amazing roses.
Working in, certainly this time of year, pretty appalling conditions at times, and we don't stop when it rains, so there's a lot of mud, thorns, we get very wet from time to time, so no, it's not a glamorous job at all.
Brian Wagner is a third-generation rose grower and runs one of Australia's largest rose nurseries.
We've got a property down here, it's just under 50 hectares. It's very intensive farming. We've most probably got about 150,000 roses, actual roses growing, and then we're planting a little bit more than that in rootstock the following season again. So in total, there's most about 400,000 plants on the property.
The rose bushes may just be dormant sticks at the moment, but that's when this nursery is at its busiest. It's an absolute hive of activity.
The seasons in this industry overlap, so we're actually cutting rootstock, preparing ground, we're putting plastic down, which is what we grow on, and we're also lifting roses for the market, so it's an incredibly busy time of the season.
So how do you prepare bare-rooted roses ready for gardeners to plant on a large scale? Well, this nursery is the place to find out.
Most people aren't aware that for every single rose, it has two parts. It has the rootstock and then the variety that you choose.
Yeah, and what we're looking at here is the rootstock that we actually put into what we call a callousing bed.
Yep.
Into the sawdust. They will sit in this sawdust for about 3 to 4 weeks. It forms a little callus, and then they get hand planted out into the field.
Now, I noticed that there's lots of cut marks on those rootstocks. What's happening there?
Yeah, it's just a term that we call de-eyeing. So we're actually chipping the eyes out of the bottom 3/4 of every one of these sticks so that they don't sucker or reroot. So as you can imagine, with all these cuttings that we've got here, there's a lot of work involved in just this little area here alone. There's many, many, many hours of work that's gone into getting it to this stage. We plant them to about a depth of about here, so it's in the old measurement, about 3 inches in depth. And we just pop them in the ground. With a gang of about 6 to 8 people, we can do about 20,000 of these in a day.
Wow. And how long before these rootstock cuttings will actually develop a strong enough root system that you can add the top part of the rose?
Usually late spring, as the temperature warms up, we'll start getting a lot of growth on the top of these, and we'll develop sort of shoots on these, sort of up to about 1 metre in length.
So here are some rootstocks that are ready to be budded with the cultivar that we want.
Yeah, this is Pierre de Ronsard, so
Beautiful
I'm just going to clean off this budwood here. I'm just going to remove the leaves and get this ready. So here's a nice little bud here, so I'm just going to cut this out. It's a very shallow cut. I'm going to pull the bark out the back, so we've got to remove this. And I'm going to put a cut in the base of this rootstock. Now I'm just going to slip this bud inside. Now I've got that in nice and tight. We'll remove that top, that little tail. That's all nice and snug. Now we just put a little patch and we'll hold that all in place. So that'll sit there now for 4 or 5 months, and that bud will grow through that patch, and after 6 months we'll cut the top off.
So you're cutting off the rootstock, and these plants have been budded a few months ago, but I'm not seeing any of the plant that you budded.
Okay. If you look very, very closely, you can see there's just a tiny little eye shoot that's pushing on here, right?
Yep.
And I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing because these are all alive.
Yep.
They've calloused in really nicely. They look like a really nice, solid little bud. And here's one that's actually shot a little bit.
Okay. So the rootstock won't grow back anymore because it's got no eyes.
Correct.
And you've cut the foliage off. So all the plant's energy from its root system pushes into the bud of the cultivar that you wanted.
Exactly.
So really, from taking your cuttings of the rootstock to producing a plant that you can ship out to someone bare-rooted in winter, we're looking at about 2 years for most roses.
Correct, yes.
Brian's partner, Bernadetta, is a photojournalist, and she captures the roses when they're at their most beautiful, flowering in the warmer months.
Well, I started enjoying roses when I met Brian 15 years ago. Before then, I didn't know anything about roses. So through him, I enjoyed the fact that there are so many colors and shapes. And from a photographic point of view, that's great because it's really interesting. You know, also the texture of the petals, it's unique.
Well, you'd have to agree that roses are beautiful, and it also takes a mighty effort to get them ready for your garden. But once you've bought one, what then? Well, later in the show, Brian will show just how easy it is to plant a bare-rooted rose. Earlier on, Brian Wagner showed us how roses are prepared so they're ready for your garden. Now, he's back to demonstrate just how easy it is to plant a bare-rooted rose to ensure growing success. So when most people get a bare-rooted rose, it looks exactly like that. It's wrapped in a bag. How should they plant it?
Well, firstly, you're going to get it out of the bag. So we'll just cut this little Loctite and we will just get rid of this potting mix here.
Now that's actually sawdust, and it's important that doesn't go in the hole. That's just to keep the roots moist while they're in transit.
It's just a means of holding the moisture in. Now look, I'm going to chop the root system back here. And just trim that up a little bit.
Looks like a very healthy root system.
I'm going to open this up just a little bit. We've got a little bit of a mounded hole here. I'm just going to drop that in there. And look, I'm just going to backfill this, and this is as easy as it is to plant a rose bush. Now, I've always planted a rose and have the soil just below bud union.
Yep.
I see so often where the bud union is sitting way up here. Get the root system down in the ground. It's nice and firm. Look how firm that is. Pack the soil in around it and done.
Okay, often people choose at great length the biggest rose they can find.
Sure.
But are you going to prune the top?
Yeah, definitely. Look, what happens is that we most probably sever and remove through cutting machinery 70–80% of the root system, but we never remove that on top. So to balance that, people want to see a rose bush, they want to see more on top. Unfortunately, we would love to be able to cut them back nice and hard, but this is the acceptable length in this country. So I'm going to do this.
Wow.
Now what will happen now, instead of getting a whole lot of top growth, which what normally forms, you're going to get a whole lot of base shoots breaking from day one. That root system is now going to support what's above, and the chance of that rose growing properly and the success rate of that plant is so much greater. So please cut them back hard.
Well, if you're looking for something tough and spectacular, you can't go past a rose. They're the perfect addition to a garden.